All right, so good afternoon, everyone. My name's Jesse Hildebrand, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those who don't know, Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants is all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Today, I'm excited to say we're joined by 6 classes from across North America so far. I'm going to give them a bit of a chance to do a shout out. So first, we've got Mr. Huang's class, grade 3 class from Toronto, Ontario. Yes, the mics are doing weird things, but they're excited. We've got Mrs. Hanson's grade 7 class from Austin, Texas. Yes. We've got Mrs. Tadaro's grade 3 class from Freehold, New Jersey. Awesome. Mrs. Editor's class from Hutchinson, Kansas is coming in. We've got Mrs. Plant's class. Awesome. And then last but not least, we've got Mrs. DeWerf's grade 8 class from Taylorville, Illinois.
I'm going to turn this. You should be facing that way.
Awesome. All right. Of course, the reason you guys are all here today is to hear our amazing speakers. We've got Teresa joining us live from Florida at the Turtle Hospital. The Turtle Hospital is one of my very favorite groups we work with at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. They rehabilitate injured sea turtles, release them into the wild, do education to teach kids and adults and kids at heart all about sea turtles, and work to make sure that beaches and oceans are safer for them generally. So without further ado, thank you so much for being with us here today, Teresa.
You're welcome. We like being able to teach people. Okay, so we are located in the Florida Keys. So the string of islands down at the very base of Florida, which is kind of perfect habitat for the sea turtles because it stays nice and warm all year round. There's lots of food. And so one of the great things about us is that we've got this great big huge pool for them because we're built on an old hotel property. And so the big pool here was the original saltwater pool of the hotel. So it's connected directly to the ocean because the ocean's right there. So it's tidal, rises and falls with the tides. There's little fish that are in here that can come in and out with the tides. There's even some bigger fish that came in when they were smaller, are now too big to leave. So that's okay. Kind of gives it perfect habitat for some of our turtles. So we use the big pool here for turtles that were either trying to get ready to be released or the turtles that cannot be released. So we've got some greens in here now. So green sea turtles get their name not because they're green, because they're brown, but because they're vegetarian. So in the wild, they eat lots of seagrass and algae. Here, they get romaine lettuce, kale, green peppers, green stuff. And they eat so much green stuff that their fat, their insides, turn green. So it's kind of like you are what you eat. Just be glad it does not work that way for us, because we'd be all kinds of different colors. And so Bernie here, short for Bernadette, because Bernie's a girl. She's one of our permanent residents. She was hit by a boat. She's got bubble butt syndrome, which basically means that she was hit by a boat and the force of the boat strike caused air to get trapped underneath her shell, which we can't get out. So now she floats. And so floating in a sea turtle is not good. It's not normal, because in a healthy sea turtle, the only time they're ever up at the surface is to breathe. But they come up, breathe, and go right back down because they eat at the bottom, they sleep at the bottom, they do everything at the bottom. So when they are stuck up at the top, they really are stuck. So it means she gets to stay in captivity. So she might stay here for the rest of her life, or she might eventually go to a zoo or an aquarium because it's the only way for a zoo or an aquarium to get a sea turtle. But to make them a little bit more comfortable while they're here, we'll attach lead weight to the outside of their shell. So Small's here. She's got 2 little gray circles on her butt. Those are weights. So it's enough weight that they can go down to the bottom and go to sleep, but not enough weight that they have to struggle to come up to the surface to breathe. But eventually those weights will also fall off. So even with the weight, they still cannot be released. But that's okay. And the big blob down at the bottom that kind of looks like a rock, that's Charlie. He's about a 130-pound loggerhead sea turtle. He's got bubble butt. But that's how they like to sleep. They like to hide their head up underneath a rock or a ledge, a reef, something, because they like to think that if they hide their heads and that they can't see us, that we can't see them. So He thinks he's hiding. He's just not as good at playing hide and seek as he thinks he is. But they do that because sea turtles cannot pull their heads and their flippers inside their shell like a box turtle can. So their heads and their flippers are always out. So when they're sleeping, they're vulnerable. So they need to be able to protect themselves. And if you were out in the wild, you'd kind of assume that was a rock. So it is pretty good camouflage. And when they're sleeping, they can hold their breath up to about 5 hours. So he could be down there for a while. And so depending on exactly how they're damaged, depends on how long they need to stay here at the turtle hospital. So like turtles like Smalls and Bernie and Charlie, they'll always stay here. But that's kind of the rare case. We want to be able to release as many turtles as we can. So sometimes they come in because they've been bit by sharks. So this is Francesco. He's about a 60-pound green sea turtle. At least we're assuming he was bit by a shark. It was definitely some sort of predator. But he's missing all of his left front flipper and the very tip of his right front flipper. So he should still be able to be released because he pretty much has 3 full flippers. It's only when they're missing more than one flipper, really, that they cannot adapt. They cannot figure out how to swim very fast again. So that's when they have to stay. But Francesco also came in with tumors, which is something that the green sea turtles get. It's caused by water pollution. It's called fibropapilloma. So that's when they have to stay in here till they're tumor-free. And then once they're tumor-free, they stay for about a full year tumor-free to make sure that they build up an immunity to the virus. So when they do get released, they won't ever get those tumors again. So like little Ash, he's another little green, but he currently has tumors. So he's got little growths all over his front flipper, his neck, his eyes. He was also attacked by some sort of predator. He's missing just half of his left front flipper, but that's okay. Just like Francesco, he'll still be able to be released. Like Kevin. Kevin was bit by a shark. So Kevin is missing both of his front flippers. So he is not able to be released. Because he's not going to be fast. Because sea turtles, they use their front flippers for propulsion. So that's what makes them go. And then they use their rear flippers like a rudder. So that's what helps them turn. But missing both front flippers, he's not going to be very fast. But there is an option that once he does heal up completely, that prosthetics might be an option. But he's still got a while to go before we're able to think about that, because he has to finish healing first. So just like with people, it sometimes takes you a little while longer to heal, especially anything that's bone related. Because it takes you longer to get over a broken arm rather than a cold. But it's typically the people that find the turtles that get to name them. So that's why sometimes our turtle names are kind of odd. So like Kevin is actually a girl, because when they're younger like this, they look identical from the outside. You can't tell just by looking at them if they're a boy or a girl. The only way to tell is to look inside and see what parts they have. It's only once they hit adulthood, which is about 25 to 30 years old, then if they're a boy, they get a long tail. Gets to be up to about 13 inches in length, whereas if they're a girl, the tail stays really short, doesn't go past the end of their shell. Where'd you go? Okay, so we'll go up top, check out some more of our turtles. And most of our turtles are found in the ocean, because when they're sick, they float. Doesn't matter how or why they're sick. If they're sick, they float. So it's the boaters and the fishermen, the people that are out there on the water, that keep an eye out. So that way they see a turtle that doesn't look quite right. So they call us. And then one of our rehab staff is always on call, just like a real hospital. So we have an ambulance. We'll go pick the turtle up. And being in the Keys, there's lots of sea turtles. Because whether they're greens and they like to eat seagrass and algae, they got a lot of green stuff. Or they're loggerheads. Loggerheads are carnivores. So they like to eat crab, lobster, conch, anything with a hard shell. So Jim here, Jim is a loggerhead. He's got a huge head. That's how they get their name. But they use that big head in order to bite through the crab and the lobster and the conch. They have a lot of muscles in there because we can't bite through a lobster. It would hurt. But Jim came in back at kind of the end of January because he was found floating. He's a bigger turtle. He's about 150 pounds. So he was kind of fun to kind of get up on the boat. But he was floating, so we brought him in. We did x-rays. We found out that he had an impaction. So he'd eaten some stuff he wasn't supposed to. So he got all blocked up. He couldn't poop, so he was gassy. Basically, he was constipated. It's something that happens to the sea turtles, especially the loggerheads, because they'll eat anything that gets put in front of them, including things like trash, plastic, kind of you name it. And so they have to come in. We'll kind of give them medication, kind of get rid of all of that, help them poop, get rid of that gas. And then once they're no longer floating, then they're able to be released. So Jim is almost ready. So he's almost able to sleep on the bottom by himself. So he's just starting to do that, which means he has just a couple more days of medications, and then hopefully we'll be able to take him off meds. He'll stay for just a few more weeks off medication, so that way we can make sure that he really is completely healthy, that it's not just the meds masking his symptoms, and then he'll be able to be released. But a lot of the times when these turtles come in, when they're floating, they'll end up floating kind of sideways, like Tippy. She's about an 85-pound loggerhead. She has an impaction. And the problem is that their intestines move around like ours do. So depending on where that blockage is in their intestines, sometimes they'll float sideways, and then it'll move down a little bit, and they'll float the other way. But floating sideways is not exactly comfortable, so we'll attach Velcro to each side of their shell, so that we can attach some foam blocks. That's what those little green things are. So they're like floaties. So that'll help level her out a little bit. And the Velcro is nice because as that impaction moves through their systems, they float different directions. And so those Velcro allows us to move those floaties around. But when they're here and they're sick, they sleep a lot. Just like for people. When you get really, really sick and you have to go to the hospital, you spend a lot of your time sleeping or just laying around, kind of vegging out. Well, so do the turtles, which is kind of a good thing because we want them to heal. We want all of their energy to go into healing. We don't want them just to swim around and tire themselves out. And then as they start feeling better, that's when they start getting a lot more active. So like Bonnie, you can tell just at a glance that she's feeling a lot better because she's a lot more active and she's looking a lot better. And that's good. It means that she's getting closer to being released. And it's not like we can ask the turtles how they're feeling that day. Well, we could ask, but they're not really going to answer. So we kind of have to rely based off of how they're eating, how they're behaving, how they're acting. So that way we can kind of gauge and see how they're doing for that day. And that way we can see kind of just on their general habitat and see how they're doing, that they're just getting better. But Bonnie likes to play around a bit. They do have nerve endings throughout their shell, so they can feel things on their shell. So when they're here, we like to give them PVC pipe that they can hide under or sleep under, rub their shell up against. And she likes being able to rub her shell. Okay, do we want to do some questions?
Absolutely, that was great, Teresa. All right, so just briefly before we begin, I'll say that we have quite a few classes watching live on YouTube as well. If you guys want to submit questions using the YouTube chat bar, I'll pass them along to Teresa. But first, we'll go to Mr. Huang's class. If you guys can mute your mic if you have a question, go right ahead.
What's the most common garbage? What's the most common garbage turtles?
The most common predator to sea turtles. That kind of depends on the size of the turtles. So when the turtles are first born, they're tiny. They're only about 2 to 3 inches long. So that means everything wants to eat them. So birds, fish, sharks, you name it. Bonnie here, Bonnie's about 20 pounds. So she's still pretty easy prey for larger fish and sharks. It's only when the turtles get to be a lot larger, so like Jim's 150 pounds, that's when they become pretty safe. But he's probably closer to about 20 years old. So it takes him a longer time to get to that larger size.
Awesome. All right, Mrs. Hans's class, if you guys have a question, come on up.
There you go.
Okay. Okay, good. My question was, say if there was a hurricane in Florida, so say if there's a hurricane in Florida, since the waves are come directly into the salt pool, would the sea turtles be affected, and would the entire building be affected if the hurricane hit in that area?
Well, yes, hurricanes are one of the dangers of living in Florida. So just like anybody else that lives in Florida, we just hope and pray that we're not going to get a major hurricane that year. But it is something that we do have plans for. So yes, we are located kind of right here on the ocean. So that means if we get a hurricane, if we get storm surge, we flood, which means all of the tanks, all of the enclosure back here floods as well. So when we know a hurricane is coming, luckily we get some notice. We have hurricane tanks. They're built a little bit closer to the middle of the island, and they're built up in such a way so that way we'll move most of the healthier turtles into those tanks. Anybody that's pretty much ready to be released, they'll get released beforehand. And the turtles that are still very sick, they'll go inside into temporary tanks or kiddie pools. But like in the wild, sea turtles, their natural instincts are just kind of hunker down and hide.
Is that, I just want to make sure, is that it, Teresa? Sorry.
Yes.
Perfect. All right, Mrs. Tadaro's class, if you guys have a question.
How much turtles come to the hospital in a year?
Every year we typically average about 100 turtles that come in. So some years it's a little more, some years it's a little less. So currently we have 46 turtles, which is sort of on the low end of average for us. But we won't ever turn a turtle away. So if there's ever a turtle that needs help in the Florida Keys, they'll come to us.
Mrs. Editor's class, if you guys have a question. Just have to demute your mic, sorry. Yeah. Perfect.
Do you ever have a busy season?
All year is kind of busy season because the Florida Keys, we don't really have set seasons like the rest of the country does and Canada, because it stays pretty warm. Like even in the winter, it only gets down to like 70, upper 60s. So it stays nice and warm, and that's why the turtles like it so much. It's just that sometimes of the year, we'll get different kinds of turtle. Because during like the summertime, that's nesting season. So that's when we'll get more of the babies and the small turtles. And then sometimes during the winter, we'll get the turtles kind of transferred from some of the other facilities because they get too cold. But that doesn't typically happen in the Florida Keys because it's too warm for that.
Right, so our fifth class now, I'm pretty sure you guys are Mrs. Wallace's class from Kirkland Lake. If that's true, just use your mic and ask your question. Yes, you are, okay. Sorry for the poor introduction earlier. So before you ask, you just have to demute your microphone. Unfortunately, I can't demute it. Sorry, guys. There'll be a little icon at the top. There you go. We're good.
Hey. Oh, 1 more second. Sorry.
How do you turtles from the out in the sea?
Say that one a little bit louder.
How do you catch the turtles when they're out at sea?
Well, when a turtle is sick, they're pretty weak. So that means that they're not going to be quite as fast as like Bonnie. Because Bonnie's not exactly easy to catch. Because she's feeling pretty good. And a perfectly healthy sea turtle, they can do bursts of speed up to about 30 miles an hour. So she's pretty fast. But when they're sick, that's when they're a lot slower. So like Caroline here, she's been here for about 3 weeks. So she's still very sick. She's got an impaction, just like Jim and Tippy. So she just does a lot of floating. And when they're really, really sick, they don't move around a whole lot. So like Chuck Norris here, he was hit by a boat. Got a pretty severe boat strike to his shell. So all he really does is sleep. And he breathes. But that's really all he needs to do at this point. So we're just giving him just enough water that he can just sleep, just has to lift his head up to breathe. We've rigged up a sprinkler system to keep his shell nice and wet. But he'll be here for at least another 6 to 8 more months to allow that shell to heal. And he's got stainless steel strips glued to his shell, just like stitches, to allow his shell to heal. It'll help stabilize it as it heals. But he'll always have a scar. So he's getting there. He's only been here a month. So he's even now more active now than he was a month ago. But as he finishes healing, he'll even get more and more active, and then that's when we'll be able to raise his water level and kind of stop using the sprinkler. So when they are sick and they're out there floating, typically if you can catch the turtle, that means that something is wrong. That means that they need to come in because they're sick. Because a perfectly healthy turtle, you're not going to be able to catch.
Excellent answer. All right. Last but not least, we'll go to Mrs. DeWerf's class. If you guys want to come up and demute and ask a question, go right ahead.
He's coming up. Hang on for a second. You can ask whatever you want. It's like the turtles practice very lot. But in a way of
Say that a little bit louder.
Yeah, sorry, guys.
Upper left. The weights of the turtles use actually vary. What is the healthy weight of the average sheep? I'm really larger than their boys.
Well, the size of the turtle depends on their age. So, like the Chuck Norris here, he's only 75 pounds. So he's maybe only like 10 to 12 years old. He's a smaller turtle. Loggerheads will get to be up to about 400 pounds. So they get quite large. The green sea turtles, like Bonnie's only 20 pounds now. So she's quite young still, like 5 to 8 years old. They'll get to be about 500 pounds. But sea turtles never stop growing, so the older the turtle, the larger they are. And that's really the only way that you can guesstimate their age is based off of their size. And the largest species of sea turtles are the leatherbacks. They're the only species that we do not have, because those guys are huge. They'll get to be up to about 2,000 pounds. And because they're so big, they don't like to live near shore. They prefer the deeper waters offshore, so we don't see them very often.
Before we go back to the classes that are live, we've got a question from a grade 2 class in Southern California, Mrs. Legaspi's class, and that is, how do sea turtle babies find their families, or do the parents take care of the babies in any way?
Well, sea turtles never find their parents. The parents never find the babies. Because once that mama turtle comes up and lays her eggs, that's it. She's done. She never sees those babies again. So it's something that the movie Finding Nemo got wrong, is that they don't meet their parents. They don't go traveling the currents together. So when they're here, like when we do need to release them, it's not like we have to go out and find their like family group. Because when they're in the wild, they're solitary. So they don't travel in groups. They just kind of hang out by themselves, which is why when they do need to be here for a couple months at a time and we have to keep them by themselves, that they're not going to get lonely because they're used to being by themselves. And then even when we do need to put the turtles together, most of the time they'll just ignore each other. But we do have some babies that you'll get to meet. I'll go down and see the babies in just a minute. And it's kind of rare for us to get babies this time of year because it's not quite nesting season yet. Nesting season, at least in the Florida Keys, is typically May through October. And so it's a little bit early for them. But the babies that we have weren't hatched from here. They were found washed up on our beach. They were probably hatched out somewhere in the Bahamas, the Caribbean, somewhere else, and then just kind of ended up on our beaches.
Did you like it?
Excellent.
Okay.
Well, while you're walking towards the babies, Mr. Oh, do you want to show us it straight ahead? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, they're on the other side there. Because the babies get to be covered. So in case we get a bird or an iguana in the enclosure here, the babies stay nice and protected because the babies are tiny. Because we have one, well, all of our babies are hawksbills. So we've got the little guy here. Where are you? There you are. She's only about 2 weeks old. So quite small. And then we've got these little guys. So maybe about kind of a month and a half old, up till about like 2 to 3 months old, and then 6 months old. But they're just adorable when they're babies.
Are adorable. Are you ready for more questions, Teresa?
Sure.
All right, well, let's go back to Mr. Huang's class. If you guys want to come on up and ask a second one, go right ahead.
How can we help the turtles in Canada?
Say that a little bit louder.
Oh, how can we help turtles in Canada? If we're in Canada, how can we help them?
Well, there's not too many sea turtles that live year-round in Canada, at least sea turtles. It gets a little bit too cold up there for them. But an easy thing you can do to help is to not litter and recycle as much as you can, because the less trash and plastic that we put in the ocean, the less stuff there's for these turtles to eat or get entangled in. And something that a lot of people don't always think about are balloons. Because if you let a balloon go into the air, it has to come down eventually. A lot of the times it does that over the oceans. And so think about it. A balloon or even a plastic bag floating in the water looks like jellyfish. So it looks like food. So these turtles eat it thinking that it's food, and then it makes them sick.
Well, make sure you don't litter, people. Let's go next to Mrs. Hans's class again.
You're it.
Okay, so I was wondering, when do you only save turtles from like Florida Keys, or are there other turtles around the country that you save?
Well, we only deal with sea turtles, and most of our turtles come from the Florida Keys, because we're the only turtle hospital in the Florida Keys. But there are other turtle facilities throughout Florida and throughout the rest of the country, so typically one of the other facilities is closer. But we will sometimes get transfers, like if another facility is not able to take care of a turtle for some reason. And so we all kind of are here to help the turtles. So if that means that getting that turtle to the best place, or someplace that has space, we'll do that.
Awesome. All right, Mrs. Tadaro's class, if you guys have another question.
Go ahead.
What is the average lifespan of your turtles?
Average lifespan is about 70 to 100 years. So they'll live for quite a long time. So like these little babies. Ooh.
Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Editor's class, welcome back. And if you guys have another question, come on up and demute the mic.
What is the oldest turtle you know about?
Well, the oldest turtle that we have would also be our largest turtle. His name is Rebel. He's about a 250-pound loggerhead sea turtle. He's up in our other enclosure, though, so we won't get to see him today. But he's probably about 40 to 50 years old. But back in March, we released a 330-pound green. She was probably close to about 60 years old. She was big. She was massive.
Outstanding. All right, Mrs. Wallace's class, if you guys have another question.
Can you go visit there?
We are open to the public, so yes, if you ever do find yourself in the Florida Keys, you can come see all of these guys in person. And we always have different turtles. So like we don't always have babies. Like we only have babies during nesting season. Some of the turtles will always stay here, especially some of the permanent residents. But the patients are here for as long as they need to be. So once they're healthy, then they're going to be able to be released. So it kind of makes it fun, because even if you do come down every single year, there's always different turtles to see, but still some of the same. Because Bubblebutt here, he's here in the corner. This is Mr. Bubblebutt. He is our longest resident. He's been here since 1989. So he came in, he was found floating, butt up, so he got the name Bubblebutt. And then we realized that more and more turtles were starting to come in with the same problem. So it got named Bubblebutt syndrome after him. And so that gray oval on his butt, that's his weight. And that boat strike also damaged his spine, so his rear flippers and tail are paralyzed. And so that's why they look so funny. But he'll always be here.
All right, and then Mrs. DeWerf's class, if you guys have another question, go right ahead.
Okay, we do. Okay, when a mom turtle gets a tumor, do the babies and the eggs also get tumors?
No. So, like the tumors, like it is a virus. So, it's a herpes-like virus. So, just because the mama turtle has it doesn't mean that the babies automatically have it. At least not that we found. And at the same time, if the mama turtle gets immune to the virus, because she builds up the antibodies, she builds up an immunity to it, does not mean that the babies are immune either. So it's one of the things that we are currently trying to study, is the virus and everything we can about it to hopefully one day figure out a vaccine or a cure, or at least a better way to treat it.
So Teresa, do you have enough time for one more round of questions?
Sure.
All right, well in that case, let's go back to Mr. Huang's class. If you guys have a third question, come on up.
How long does it take for a turtle egg to hatch?
How long does what?
Take for a turtle egg to hatch.
It typically takes about 50 to 60 days. And once that mama turtle comes up and lays her eggs, like she'll go back out into the ocean for about 2 weeks and she'll come up and lay again. So in one season, a mama turtle can lay between 4 to 6 times.
How many
So
eggs?
each one of those babies has about 100 brothers and sisters. And each nest has about 100 eggs. So they have lots of siblings. which is kind of a good thing why they don't all stay together.
Excellent. All right, Mrs. Hans's class, if you guys want to ask us third question.
Sure. Yep. There we go. What would you say is the main cause of death for turtles in the ocean?
Well, their biggest kind of enemy are people. Most of the reasons why we get a lot of turtles that just straight die would be due to boat strikes. Because like Chuck Norris, he was a very lucky turtle. He got hit in such a way that even though it's a very bad wound, that it didn't kill him. But unfortunately, not all turtles are that lucky. But then we also get a lot of turtles that with the tumors, because the tumors make it very, very hard for the turtle to eat, to kind of be a turtle. And like sometimes it's not just one problem that the turtles have to deal with either. So like this turtle here, this is Montel. So he's had everything that could possibly happen to a turtle be done to him. So he's been hit by a boat, bit by a shark, entangled in fishing line, and he's had tumors. So he now only has 2.5 flippers and 1 eye. So he's a very, very lucky turtle.
All right, well, will he be a permanent resident?
He is a permanent resident, yes.
Mrs. Tadaro's class, if you guys have a third question.
Yes, we do.
Can mothers lay eggs in the hospital, or you just find them on the beach?
Well, it's very, very hard for sea turtles to breed in captivity because their instincts tell them that they have to go back to their eggs. So even if we were to give them a nice, pretty fake beach here, they know that it's not their beach, so they won't lay. So the only time we ever get turtles with eggs are if something happens to them during nesting season, kind of in between nests, which doesn't happen very often.
Answer. All right, Mrs. Editor's class, if you guys have a third question.
How many species of turtles are there?
Well, we have 4 different species of sea turtles here. There's 5 different species of sea turtles found in Florida. So most common that we get are the greens and the loggerheads. Then we have some of those hawksbills, those are little babies. We have one Kemp's Ridley. Her name is Bender. She's one of our permanent residents. She's somewhere in this pool, but she really, really likes to hide. And then the only species we do not have is the leatherback. And then there's only 7 species throughout the entire world. So you have the olive ridleys, which are primarily in the Pacific Ocean, and then the Australian flatbacks, which are over near Australia.
Excellent. All right, Mrs. Wallace's class, you guys have a last question?
Yeah. How do you bring the turtles into the boat?
Well, it kind of depends on the size of the turtle. Like some of the turtles are really easy to kind of pick up and rescue because they're small. Some of the larger turtles that get to be a little bit more difficult. So that 330-pound green sea turtle that we released back in March, she came in back in February. She was found 16 miles offshore. She was found by a boater, and so the boater called us. We sent Fish and Wildlife out in one of their boats to go pick her up without realizing how big she was. So they got out there, saw this turtle, looked at each other and said, nope, that's not going to happen. So 2 of our people went out on a Coast Guard boat. So between the 2 of us, the 4 Coast Guard, and the 2 FWC officers, between all of them, they were finally able to get Jolly, that turned out to be her name, on the boat. So sometimes it's a group effort to try to rescue some of these turtles.
Awesome. I was wondering about the 330-pound one, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
Mrs. DeWert's class, if you guys have a last question, come right ahead.
You said that when you put them together, they kind of ignore each other. So if they hang out by themselves and ignore each other all the time, how do they find their mates?
Well, sea turtles don't have big courtship rituals like a lot of other animals do. So basically, like late winter is early spring is mating season. So if they're like adult age, like if they're large enough and then they're in a certain spot during mating season, that means they're kind of fair game. And so the males just kind of find a female and latch on. Other than that, they're by themselves. Because the only time they're ever with other turtles in the wild is during mating or hatching. So it's kind of amazing, actually, that they are able to find each other.
All right, so that brings us to the end of questions, guys. Teresa, thank you so much for being with us here today and showing us around the Turtle Hospital.
You're welcome. That's why we're here. We love being able to teach people.
Now, as Teresa said, there's always different turtles at the Turtle Hospital, and they do hangouts with us regularly. So if any of you classes want to come back and learn even more, you can do another hangout with us or go to theturtlehospital.org to learn even more. What we do at the end of every hangout is if all you classes want to demute your mics and say a big thank you to Teresa, go right ahead. We'd always love to see the class's enthusiasm.
Thank you.
Awesome, guys. Have a lovely rest of your day. Thanks so much, Teresa.